2015 Chevy Traverse. So here we are at my shop. It's also all-wheel drive. We're doing the wheel bearings. It's lots of fun. So we'll get right into it here. So we know we got to take that nut off, and we also have to remove this caliper and the bracket itself, this right here, and it bolts back in here. Look at that, the bolt's almost out, and that's because I already loosened it. If they're that loose, you're in trouble. Another one down here at the bottom, right there. So I already took it out. This one's about to come out. Then we're gonna hang the caliper over here and get it out of the way. Then we can pop the rotor off. We can get that center bolt out. And I think there's 3 bolts from behind that we have to get the bearing out itself. We also have to disconnect this sensor. So we got lots to do. All right, so you can see that this bolt had some Loctite on it at one time, so remember to put that back on. It was a little tight coming out, but I'm sure that was Loctite doing its thing. So now we're going to remove this bracket, which I loosened, I thought. There we go. It's a good time to look at those brake pads, see how much material you got left. Remember, it's not the backing of the pad, it's just the friction material. So that one's getting a little thin, that one's a little bit thicker. We'll make sure that the slides are good and clean. So where those other bolts, the pins are. But for now, we'll keep concentrating on this wheel bearing. So I just put a zip tie on the caliper to hold it to the sway bar there, the rear sway bar. And now we can get this sensor out. So I believe that's 10 mil. So we'll get that screw out, or that bolt out, and we'll get that sensor out of there. So don't expect to get a socket on that thing, but on that bolt there, because it's right underneath this part, which blocks its way. But you can get a wrench in here. I'm just using a long, regular wrench, and then once you loosen it, it comes right out. So then we'll just gently, we may have to use pliers very gently because this is plastic, and get that sensor out of there. All right, we're gonna take this rotor off. So next we're gonna take this Torx 30 out, which I'm gonna need 2 hands. And I also brought a multi-angle swinging press hammer. And once that bolts out, we can tap in between the studs without hitting the studs and break that rotor free. So that's next. So we'll set that over there. And here we are, here's our wheel bearing. We still gotta take that nut off. We'll use the impact gun for that. And the 3 bolts from behind, I gotta get those out. And it should just slide out. I'm sure that's not gonna happen. So out of the 3 bolts that hold the wheel bearing in, the one that I thought would be the hardest is actually not that hard. It was the very bottom one, and I thought it would be tight getting in around there, but if you come straight down from this angle, like that, you got lots of swing in there. So that comes out actually quite easily. The other 2, not so bad either. Little tight. I used a shallow socket. This one I used a deep socket, as you can see. And I got them out. All right, I'm gonna use my impact gun to take this nut off. It's probably pretty tight, and that'll make it a lot easier. Pretty noisy, so I'm just gonna start. That rolled right to the front of the car. Anyway, now I'll just get a punch and we'll put it in here. I should put that nut back on a little bit and hammer in with a nice brass punch there. Just loosen that off in there. That's where that nut landed. Right from the back wheel, all the way around underneath the car there. So here I got a slide hammer that I just bolted onto the hub. This is the one I have. It's a big one. It sounded actually pretty funny. What I mean is it's a heavy duty one. I work on a lot of big trucks, and that's where I have this from. But actually fits on here quite nicely because these are a little bit flexible. They're spring loaded, sort of. So it's meant to pull off anything. So let's put that to the test. And there we go. It's off. a little extended on the CV. We'll just continue on with that tapping of the axle and get it out of there. And that worked quite nicely. About 6 good hits with this hammer, this part here, sliding on, you know, that's where they get the name, slide hammer. A little WD on that, and it came right off. So yeah. So we'll just continue to tap that axle out. I can remove this puller obviously now and continue on. So I cleaned up all in here as much as I could. I had a little wire wheel on a drill, and I got some sandpaper and cleaned it all up. Even got a screwdriver and just sort of cleaned that groove out a little bit. Put some anti-seize on there in case it has to be done again. Sprayed a little oil on here so that it slides in nicely. And I put the backing plate on. I'm about to put the new bearing on. So I'll get that done. We'll start a bolt on the top here that I can just line everything up. I'll line up this backing plate and then put the bearing on. All right, so because we want to do a good job, we're going to clean all these surfaces. We're going to clean up here, make sure there's no dirt, anything in here, any corrosion. We're going to clean up this surface here where that part sits against. And we're going to clean up the other side of this backing plate, so under here, and where the wheel bearing sits, and make sure everything's nice and clean. We don't want everything moved out a little bit by some debris. So what I usually use is a die grinder like this and clear up that surface. And then I also do in here, do the shoulder all the way around. All right. Also, you should clean up this surface here where it meets the wheel bearing, and just make sure that there's no rust or anything trapped back in here. This one's pretty clean. I don't think I put it on too long ago. So anyway, get that cleaned up and put that guy back on. That looks better. That can go on. All right, new wheel bearings installed. Well, installed, I mean I've put the 3 bolts in. You can see the threads of one there, and down here, and down at the bottom there. Anyway, they're all in and tight, but not torqued. And we're gonna run this guy in, and we had one casualty. It was something I couldn't get out. That was the ABS sensor, and I thought maybe I can push it out from behind, and no such luck. Ended up breaking. So I'll have to see if I can get one of them and maybe get the other side apart, because the parts store is going to close soon. So make sure I don't break that ABS sensor. If I can get it out, great. If I can't, I'll order 2. Tight. Now get the torque wrench. So while you're in here, let's make sure this guy's free. I sprayed a little bit of penetrating fluid on it and tried it with a screwdriver, and it moves. You don't want to find out after everything's back together that it was seized and you missed it. So I'm going to put a little anti-seize in behind the rotor. I always put a little around here especially. Make sure that the next time it needs brakes, it comes off easy. There is an alignment, so there's 1 screw. Gotta make sure that lines up, and we're good. All right, so rotor is installed. I put that bolt in there, and I just have the caliper and mount bracket to put on. But like I said, I'm going to clean up those sliders, just make sure that they're good and free, and that'll give this guy all the life out of those brakes. All right, bracket on, caliper back on, slides all cleaned up, pads moving free on the backing plate, on the mounting plate. This is done. Now I just got to do the other side. Another important thing to remember when servicing calipers. Everybody takes the slides apart, loops them, and is familiar with checking them, I think. You know, you got nice smooth movement, that's good. It doesn't hurt to pull those apart, clean the grease out of them, and put fresh grease in it every now and then. Now, a lot of people forget about this part. It's where the pad rides. So in this little crevice here, the little channel, see how the pad rides in there. So what I've done is I clean that up, and on both sides, I've cleaned up in here and in here, of course. And sometimes, not in this case, but in sometimes, rust gets underneath this piece that snaps in, that metal piece, the little shim, I think it's called. So rust gets in between there. So you got to get a file or a piece of sandpaper or something like that and file it out of there. Obviously don't go filing off tons of metal, you're just getting the rust off there. Okay, and then clean it all up. I put a little bit of oil on it, like a little bit of penetrant or something like that, and that's it. But those got to fit, and they've got to move back and forth. They're a floating pad, right? Both of them should move quite easily. All right, that Traverse is done. I took it for road test, everything was great. No more noise in the back end, and my buddy Adam is happy about that. All right, if you haven't seen the video on this thing, check it out. Other than that, just like and hit that like button, share and subscribe.